On my son's wedding day, his cocky bride introduced me to her boss as an unemployed loser. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The bride fell silent when her boss smiled, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, "It's wonderful to see you, partner." Then, he turned to the bride with a chilling finality in his voice. "You're fired." She was utterly speechless with shock. The hostess led us to a secluded corner table at the Lakeview Grill, and from across the crisp white tablecloth, I watched Diana Harrington adjust the collar of her expensive blouse before settling into her chair. My son, Nathan, gave me a warm, reassuring smile, his pride in his fiancée practically radiating off him. Diana beamed at both of us, her large engagement ring catching the soft, ambient lighting of the restaurant and flashing like a tiny star. "So, Mrs. Wood," Diana began, not even waiting for the server to arrive with our drinks. "Nathan tells me you're between opportunities at the moment." I blinked slowly. Between opportunities. The phrase hung in the air like an overly strong perfume, cloying, artificial, and entirely unnecessary. "I'm retired," I said simply, carefully unfolding the heavy linen napkin onto my lap. Diana's smile widened, a practiced, corporate expression that never quite reached her eyes. "Right, of course. Well, I work at Technova Innovations. We're the leading AI solutions company in the entire Midwest. I'm a senior manager of corporate sales." "That sounds impressive," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly neutral. "How long have you been with them?" 3 years now. In that time, I've increased my department sales by a full 40%. Diana leaned back in her chair, a smug posture that clearly anticipated my admiration. "What field were you in, Mrs. Wood?" "Nothing particularly special, just business." Nathan touched Diana's arm gently. "Mom's just being modest. She always says that." Diana nodded with a knowing look. "I see. Well, the most important thing is staying healthy at your age, right? Keeping busy with hobbies and such." My fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the cool glass of water. "At my age." The condescension dripped from her words, as thick and sticky as honey from a broken jar. "Hobbies to keep me occupied." I agreed, my tone even. Just then, the waiter appeared at our table, his pen poised over his notepad. Diana ordered the pan-seared salmon with a truffle risotto without a second glance at the price. Nathan chose the herb-roasted chicken. I glanced at the menu for only a moment. "I'll have the soup and sandwich combo, please." Diana's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. "The soup special? Mom, are you sure? This is meant to be a celebration." Nathan's cheeks flushed a delicate shade of pink. "Diana, it's fine. My mom likes simple food." Of course, of course." Diana waved her hand in a dismissive gesture. "Everyone has different budgets. I completely understand." The word budgets landed between us with the force of a slap. She understood, did she? This 34-year-old middle manager believed she had my entire financial situation pegged based on my lunch order. "Tell me more about Technova," I said, deliberately steering the conversation away from my supposed poverty. "What sort of AI solutions do you provide?" Diana's chest seemed to puff up visibly. "It's all cutting-edge stuff. Machine learning algorithms for corporate efficiency, predictive analytics, automated decision trees. We're completely revolutionizing how modern businesses operate." "Fascinating. Has the company been around for long?" "About 30 years. But it really took off in the last decade. Before that, it was probably just another one of those garage startups, you know. Now, we're pulling in some very serious revenue." She cut into her salmon with a surgical precision. "I'm actually on track for a promotion to department director. Maybe even regional manager after that." Nathan smiled proudly. "Diana's incredibly driven. She sometimes works 60-hour weeks. 60 hours? I raised an eyebrow. That's true dedication. Success requires sacrifice, Mrs. Wood. That's something my generation understands. Diana's tone suggested that my generation, by contrast, understood very little. The business world moves at lightning speed now. You have to adapt, or you get left behind. I took a spoonful of my soup. It was a surprisingly good tomato bisque. Change can certainly be challenging. Exactly. That's why I'm always staying current with industry trends, attending seminars, networking constantly. It's not enough to just coast through life anymore. Diana gestured with her fork for emphasis. People your age, no offense, sometimes get stuck in their old patterns. The world is just different now. Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Diana just means that things have evolved since my mom's time in the workforce. Right, evolution. I nodded slowly. Survival of the fittest and all that. Diana missed the sharp edge in my voice completely. Precisely. Companies like Technova reward innovation and results. Old school thinking just doesn't cut it anymore. We need fresh perspectives, aggressive strategies. And you provide those? Absolutely. My department's numbers speak for themselves. A 40% growth doesn't just happen by accident. Diana leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Between you and me, some of the older employees there are, well, let's just say they're not keeping up. Dead weight. If we're being honest about it. Dead weight. I filed that particular phrase away carefully. The older employees must have a great deal of experience, though, I suggested mildly. Diana shrugged. Experience without adaptation is just stagnation. The company would probably be better off replacing half the senior staff with hungry young talent. Nathan laughed nervously. Diana is very passionate about efficiency. Passion is what drives results. Diana continued, warming to her theme. That's what separates the winners from. She glanced meaningfully at my half-eaten soup bowl. Well, from people who settle for less. The insult hung in the space between us like a cloud of smoke. People who settle for less. People like me. Apparently. The unemployed old woman, ordering the soup special while her son's successful fiancé enjoyed a truffle risotto. I set my spoon down on the plate with deliberate care. The soft clink of metal against ceramic sounded surprisingly sharp in the quiet restaurant. Settling can be a choice, I said quietly. Diana didn't hear the warning in my tone. She was too busy savoring her perceived victory over the pathetic old woman sitting across from her. She wiped her mouth with her napkin, clearly energized by what she interpreted as my surrender. The salmon on her plate was barely half finished, but she had already moved into full lecture mode. You know what, Mrs. Wood? I really respect that you're trying to stay positive about your situation. Her voice carried that particular condescending tone people reserve for speaking to small children or the elderly. But have you considered consulting? With your experience, there might be some small opportunities. Experience is an interesting thing, I replied carefully. Sometimes it teaches you to stay quiet and just observe, but you can't just observe forever. Diana's enthusiasm was bordering on aggressive. You have to move forward. Take action. I mean, look at me. I have a plan to become department director within a year, and regional manager within 3. You have to set goals. Create timelines. Nathan nodded encouragingly. Diana's very goal-oriented. Goals are important, I agreed, though sometimes the most important ones aren't obvious to outsiders. Diana completely missed the implication. Exactly. That's why you need to put yourself out there. Network. Meet people. Let them know you're available. I could even introduce you to some of my contacts. If you'd like, maybe for some entry-level positions. Nothing too demanding, of course. Entry-level positions for me. The irony was so thick, I could have served it for dessert. That's very generous of you, I said, my voice smooth as silk. It's about giving back, you know. Helping those who are less fortunate. Diana's voice was now dripping with a sickening magnanimity. Successful people have a responsibility to lift others up. Nathan beamed at her. See, Mom, Diana really cares about people. Oh, I can tell. I took a slow sip of water. Your compassion is quite evident. Diana preened under what she clearly took as a compliment. It's not really about the money for me, Mrs. Wood. Don't get me wrong, the 6-figure salary is nice. But it's about making a difference. Building something meaningful. 6 figures. She said it as if she were announcing the cure for cancer. Building something meaningful, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. Like, Technova itself was built. Well, sure. But that was different. The founders back then were just lucky, I guess. Right place, right time. The real innovation is happening now, with people like me who are pushing the envelope. Lucky. 30 years of 18-hour days, missed family dinners, and constant, crushing financial stress, all reduced to simple luck. The founders were lucky, I said slowly. They had to be. I mean, what did they really know about AI back then? The technology barely existed. They probably just stumbled into their success. Diana laughed. A sound that grated against my ears. Now we're the ones doing the real work, turning their accidental success into something truly professional. Nathan could sense the tension building, but he completely misread its source. Mom, Diana just wants to help. She knows the job market can be tough for people who are starting over. Starting over? As if my entire career had been erased, leaving me to begin again from scratch, like a fresh college graduate. Starting over can be liberating, I said, my voice carefully controlled. It gives you a new perspective on what really matters. Absolutely. Diana seized on this immediately. That's the attitude you need. A fresh start, new opportunities. You just have to be realistic about your limitations. My limitations? The phrase hung in the air like a direct challenge. And what limitations would those be? I asked quietly. Diana gestured vaguely with her hand. Well, your age is a factor. Technology moves so fast. It's hard for older workers to keep up. Plus, most companies want to hire people who can grow with them long-term. Long-term growth? I allowed a hint of amusement into my voice. Like, say, 30 years? Exactly. See? You're getting it. Diana was clearly pleased with her student's progress. Though obviously, starting at your age, you'd be looking at maybe 5, 10 years maximum before retirement. Companies invest in futures, not. She caught herself, fumbling for the right word. Not what? Not short-term situations. She finished lamely. Nathan reached across the table, his hand hovering near mine. Mom, maybe we should talk about something else. But Diana was on a roll now, her voice growing more passionate with every word. The thing is, Mrs. Wood, the business world rewards drive and ambition. It's not enough to just show up anymore. You need vision, innovation, the ability to disrupt existing paradigms. Disrupt paradigms, I echoed, my voice flat. Right. Like what I'm doing at Technova. The old guard there. They're just stuck in these outdated methodologies. They think because they've been around since the beginning, they know everything, but markets evolve. Customer needs change. Sometimes you have to tear down the old systems to build something better. Tear down the old systems built by lucky founders who had just stumbled into success. I placed my napkin on the table with deliberate precision. The gesture was quiet, but something about it made Diana pause mid-sentence. Excuse me, I said, standing up from the table. I think I need some fresh air. Mom! Nathan's voice was filled with genuine concern. Are you okay? Just tired, I replied, pulling out my wallet. I placed $40 on the table, more than enough to cover my soup and sandwich, plus a generous tip. This should handle my portion. Diana's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the cash. Mrs. Wood, you don't have to, I insist. I straightened the lapels of my jacket. Thank you for dinner. And for all the career advice. Nathan half rose from his chair. Mom, please don't leave. Diana meant exactly what she said. I looked directly at my son's fiancée, and I heard every single word. The 45-minute drive from downtown Chicago to my house in Evanston gave me time to process what had just happened. Diana's words echoed in my mind with each passing mile. Lucky founders, dead weight, starting over at your age. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, the initial sting of anger had crystallized into something much harder, much more dangerous. A cold, calculated purpose. I unlocked my front door and headed straight for my study. This room was my sanctuary, a space carefully arranged to tell the real story of my life, the story Diana Harrington had no idea existed. The walls were lined with framed photographs and awards that I usually kept hidden from casual visitors. There were the original Technova Incorporation papers from 1995, signed by Walter Klein and myself. Photos from our very first successful product launch, a collection of industry recognition awards spanning 3 decades, and the Forbes article from 2018 that called me the quiet revolutionary of AI innovation. I sank into my worn leather chair and stared at the photograph on my desk. It was Walter and me, standing in that cramped, dusty garage where it all began. We looked so young, so fiercely determined, 2 30-year-olds who were absolutely convinced we could change the world. And we'd been right. I picked up my phone and dialed Walter's number. He answered on the second ring, as he always did. Elizabeth, how was dinner with the future daughter-in-law? Enlightening, I said carefully. How are things at the company? The same as always when you're not here. Absolute chaos and confusion. Walter's laugh was warm and familiar. Seriously though, everything's running smoothly. The quarterly reports look excellent. When are you finally coming back from this retirement experiment of yours? I'm still enjoying the break, old friend. Well, enjoy it while you can. That Diana Harrington in sales has been making some noise about wanting more responsibility. The kid's ambitious. I'll give her that. My hand tightened on the phone. Diana Harrington. You know her? Senior sales manager. Been with us for 3 years. She actually has some decent ideas, but she's got that hungry look that always makes me nervous. Keeps talking about modernizing our approach and disrupting outdated paradigms. Disrupting outdated paradigms. The exact same phrase she had used less than an hour ago. What kind of disruption is she proposing? I asked. Oh, you know, the usual young hotshot stuff. Thinks the company would be more efficient without so much legacy thinking. Wants to restructure entire departments, bring in a wave of fresh talent. Just yesterday she suggested that we might be carrying too much senior dead weight. Senior dead weight. There it was again. An interesting perspective, I managed to say. Between you and me, Elizabeth, I think she sees herself running this place someday. I can't quite decide if that's admirable ambition or just dangerous arrogance. I stared at the photograph of our garage startup days. Maybe it's both. Probably. Anyway, her sales numbers are solid, so I can't complain too much. The board loves her. Walter paused for a moment. You sure you don't want to come back? I miss having someone around who actually remembers why we started this company in the first place. I remember perfectly, Walter, I said quietly. And that's exactly why I'm staying away for just a little longer. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and pulled up Technova's latest financial statements. 30 years of growth, innovation, and careful stewardship, annual revenue was now approaching $200 million. Over 800 employees across 4 states. All of it dismissed by Diana Harrington as nothing more than a lucky stumble. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time all evening. Diana wanted to disrupt paradigms. She wanted to eliminate the dead weight. Perfect. I would give her exactly what she was asking for. The wedding was scheduled for June 15th. That gave me 4 months to let Diana continue believing that she had correctly assessed my worth. 4 months to watch her display her true character to Nathan, to our family, to everyone who mattered. 4 months to plan the most educational experience of her arrogant young life. I pulled out a legal pad and began to make notes, jotting down Diana's comments about the founders, her dismissal of experienced employees, her condescending advice about entry-level positions. Every single insult, every flawed assumption, every moment of casual cruelty needed to be remembered and addressed. The woman wanted to tear down old systems and build something better. Excellent. I was going to let her try. I picked up the old garage photograph again, studying Walter's younger face next to mine. We had built Technova with our bare hands, sacrificing nearly everything for a vision that had seemed impossible to everyone else. We had earned every single success, survived every single failure, and created something that outlasted the predictions of every expert who had written us off. Diana Harrington thought that experience without adaptation was stagnation. Soon, she was going to learn what 3 decades of adaptation looked like when it was directed at a very specific target. I closed my laptop and headed upstairs, already planning the next day's activities. I had a persona to maintain, a deception to perfect, and a lesson to prepare. Diana wanted to see what happened when successful people helped those less fortunate. She was about to find out. 2 weeks had passed since that illuminating dinner. I'd spent the time exactly as Diana would have expected. Reading newspapers on my front porch, tending to my small garden, and playing the role of the aimless retiree to perfection. When I heard the car pull into my driveway that Tuesday afternoon, I was ready. Through my living room window, I watched Diana emerge from her sleek BMW, adjusting the shoulders of her expensive suit jacket. Nathan bounded up my front steps with obvious excitement, clutching what could only be a stack of wedding invitations. "Mom!" he practically burst through my front door. "We have something wonderful to show you." Diana followed more slowly, her eyes already scanning my modest home with that familiar expression of polite disappointment. The furniture was comfortable but not expensive, the decorations tasteful but unremarkable, perfect for maintaining my carefully crafted image. "Mrs. Wood." Diana's handshake was firm but brief. "I hope we're not interrupting your afternoon activities." Afternoon activities. As if I spent my days watching daytime television and napping. "Not at all," I replied cheerfully. "What brings you two here?" Nathan produced an elegant cream-colored envelope with flourishes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "The official wedding invitation. You're the first person to see it." I opened it carefully, admiring the delicate calligraphy and the heavy cardstock. "This is beautiful, honey. June 15th, at the Lakeshore Country Club. Very elegant." Diana chose the venue, Nathan said proudly. "It's where all the important Technova events are held." Diana puffed up slightly. "Location matters for occasions like this. My boss will be attending, along with several members of the board. I wanted to choose somewhere that reflects." She gestured vaguely at my cozy living room. "Professional standards." "It sounds impressive," I said, setting the invitation down on my coffee table. "I should probably start thinking about what to wear." This was Diana's moment, and she seized it with a missionary's enthusiasm. "Actually, Mrs. Wood, that's something I wanted to discuss with you." Her tone shifted to what she probably thought was tactful concern. "My boss will be at the wedding. Walter Klein. He's a very influential person in our industry. Perhaps you should dress, how should I put this, more presentably than usual." Nathan shot her a warning look, But Diana was committed to her mission of improving her future mother-in-law's appearance. "I have a perfectly good suit," I said mildly. "I'm sure you do." Diana's eyes swept over my casual slacks and cardigan. "It's just that Walter expects a certain level of sophistication from the families of his employees. First impressions matter enormously in business. Walter expects sophistication." If only Diana knew that Walter and I had spent the early years splitting pizza and working 20-hour days, when sophistication meant remembering to wear matching socks. "Don't you worry, dear," I replied with what I hoped was a reassuring simplicity. "I know how to handle bosses." Diana's expression suggested she doubted this claim entirely. "Walter Klein is a very influential person in our industry, Mrs. Wood. He's built Technova from nothing into a major corporation. Men like that notice everything. How you dress, how you speak, how you carry yourself. Built from nothing." Walter would appreciate that description, considering we had literally started with nothing but sheer determination and a mountain of credit card debt. "Really?" I kept my voice carefully neutral. "It will be interesting to meet him." Something in my tone must have struck Diana as insufficiently odd, because she leaned forward earnestly. "Mrs. Wood, I'm not trying to be difficult, but this wedding represents my professional future, too. Walter's opinion of my family connections could affect my career trajectory. I need everyone to make the right impression. The right impression. Translation: I needed to look successful enough to reflect well on Diana, but not so successful as to overshadow her. "What kind of impression are you hoping for?" I asked. "Respectable. Conservative. Someone who understands the value of hard work and traditional values." Diana's voice carried the patronizing tone of someone explaining a simple concept to a slow child. "Walter appreciates people who have earned their place through dedication and merit. Earned their place through dedication and merit. Like, for instance, spending 30 years building a company from scratch." Perhaps sensing the undercurrent of tension, Nathan interjected. "Mom, maybe we should look at your suit together. I could help you pick out a nice tie for it." "That's very thoughtful, dear." I smiled at my son, genuinely touched by his attempt to bridge the chasm between his mother and his fiancé. "I'm sure I can find something appropriate." But Diana wasn't quite finished with her improvement project. "The important thing is to project dignity, Mrs. Wood. Walter has very traditional ideas about family values and personal responsibility. He believes people should present themselves with pride, regardless of their circumstances." Regardless of their circumstances. The phrase hung in the air, an elegant insult wrapped in silk and tied with the ribbon of good intentions. "I understand completely," I said. "Personal presentation says a lot about a person's character." "Exactly." Diana beamed, pleased that her lesson had finally been absorbed. "Character matters more than bank accounts to men like Walter. He can spot authentic quality from across a room." Authentic quality. Walter certainly could spot it. We'd been recognizing it in each other for 30 years. Nathan, sensing the conversation was on the verge of another nosedive, suggested we move to the garden, claiming he wanted to show Diana my tomato plants. He led me through the sliding glass door into my small backyard garden, leaving Diana inside, conveniently studying the wedding seating charts he'd left on my dining table. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the neat rows of vegetables I'd been cultivating since my retirement. "Mom!" Nathan's voice carried a weight I hadn't heard since he was 16, and trying to explain why he'd borrowed my car without asking. "What are you planning?" I settled onto the wooden bench I'd built last summer, gesturing for him to join me. "Planning? I'm just trying to be a good host to my future daughter-in-law." "Don't." Nathan sat down but turned to face me directly. "I've known you my entire life. You're up to something, and it involves Diana, and I need to know what island." Through the glass door, I could see Diana hunched over the seating charts, probably calculating her optimal positioning relative to Walter's table. The irony was almost too perfect. Sweetheart, sometimes people just need a little time to show their true nature. What is that supposed to mean? Nathan's voice sharpened with frustration. Why won't you just tell Diana the truth about Technova? Why are you letting her think you're some unemployed old woman who needs her career advice? There it was. My son was far more perceptive than Diana gave him credit for. You know about Technova? I asked carefully. I've always known, Mom. Maybe not all the details. But I knew you didn't just work there. You helped create it. Those photographs in your study. The awards you think I don't notice. The way Walter talks about you when he calls. Nathan's eyes were bright, with unshed tears. Why are you lying to the woman I'm going to marry? I reached over and took his hand. His fiancée's engagement ring was on his finger, catching the sunlight and throwing tiny rainbows across the garden dirt. I'm not lying, Nathan. I'm just not volunteering information. That's the same thing, isn't it? I squeezed his fingers gently. Has Diana ever asked about my background? Really asked? With genuine curiosity about who I am as a person? Nathan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. We both knew Diana had made her assumptions based on my appearance and my current lifestyle, and had never bothered to dig any deeper. But this isn't fair. Nathan's voice cracked slightly. She doesn't know she's being tested. Life isn't fair, sweetheart. People judge each other every single day based on surface impressions. The question is, what kind of person does Diana become when she thinks she has the upper hand? Through the glass, Diana was now pacing while talking on her phone, probably updating someone about her boss attending the wedding. Her gestures were animated. Self-important. You saw how she treated me at dinner. I continued quietly. The condescension. The unsolicited advice. The casual dismissal of anyone she perceives as unsuccessful. Is that the woman you want to spend the rest of your life with? Nathan was quiet for a long moment, watching Diana through the window. She's not always like that. When we're alone, she's different. Kinder. I'm sure she island. But character isn't about what we do when it's easy, Nathan. It's about what we do when we think nobody important is watching. So, you're preparing some kind of lesson for her? Nathan's voice was a mixture of concern and reluctant curiosity. What's going to happen at the wedding when she finds out? I smiled, feeling the familiar satisfaction of a well-laid plan clicking into place. She gets to learn that assumptions can be dangerous. That treating people with respect isn't about their bank balance or their job title. That kindness shouldn't be conditional on social status, and if she doesn't learn if she gets angry or embarrassed, then you'll know exactly who you're marrying. I turned to look at my son directly. Nathan, I'm not trying to sabotage your happiness. I'm trying to protect it. It's better to see her true character now than to discover it 5 years into your marriage. Nathan stared at his hands, turning the engagement ring slowly around his finger. You want me to keep this a secret until the wedding? I want you to watch. Really watch how Diana treats people she thinks are beneath her. Watch how she talks about Walter, about success, about what makes someone worthy of respect. I paused, and then you can decide for yourself what kind of life you want. What if I decide Diana is exactly who I thought she was? Then I will dance at your wedding and welcome her into this family with genuine joy. And I meant every word. But Nathan, just make sure you're seeing her clearly, and not just seeing what you hope is there. Nathan stood up, brushing dirt from his jeans. Through the glass, Diana was ending her phone call, looking around for us with an expression of mild impatience. She's going to hate you when she finds out, he said quietly. Probably. The question is, will she hate herself for how she's treated me? Nathan looked at me for a long moment, wrestling with his loyalties and his uncertainties. Finally, he nodded slowly. Okay, Mom. I'll keep your secret. But promise me you're not doing this just for revenge. I promise you, sweetheart. Everything I'm doing is because I love you. Diana appeared at the sliding door, tapping her watch pointedly. Nathan, we should probably head out soon. I have a conference call with the West Coast team in an hour. Coming. Nathan called back, then looked at me one more time. Just be gentle with her, okay? Whatever it is you're planning. I stood up and kissed his forehead. Gentle lessons are rarely the ones that stick. The months between March and June passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of preparation. While Diana continued her condescending check-ins and Nathan maintained our agreed-upon silence, I methodically arranged every detail of the most educational wedding gift of Diana's young life. 3 days before the wedding, I stood in Armando's custom tailoring on Michigan Avenue, studying my reflection in the three-way mirror. The charcoal gray suit was impeccably cut, but deliberately understated, expensive enough to command respect, yet conservative enough to avoid suspicion. The fit is perfect, Mrs. Wood, Armando said, adjusting the jacket's shoulders with a practiced precision. This suit will emphasize your dignity without screaming about its price tag. That's exactly the point, I replied, admiring how the subtle pinstripes caught the light. The important thing is that it says all the right things without using any words. Ah, you understand elegance. Armando smiled approvingly. True quality speaks in whispers, not shouts. 2 days before the wedding, I visited Cartwright Associates, a jewelry store in the Gold Coast district. The sales associate, a sharp woman in her 40s, spread several options across a black velvet cloth. These Technova logo cufflinks are quite striking, she said, holding up a pair of platinum pieces, each with the company's distinctive diamond. Chip, T. Custom ordered, I assume. A small commemorative piece, I said, fastening them to my shirt cuffs. They caught the store's lighting, beautifully subtle enough to appear understated, yet distinctive enough for Walter to recognize immediately. An excellent choice. They suggest success without a hint of ostentation. The day before the wedding, I met with Jonathan Pierce, my private banker at First National. His corner office overlooked Lake Michigan, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing the endless blue horizon. Such a substantial amount for a wedding gift. Jonathan raised his eyebrows as he reviewed the transfer documents. Are you absolutely certain about this figure, Elizabeth? This is a very special occasion, I replied, signing the authorization form with deliberate, steady strokes. My son deserves the finest wedding gift possible. $50,000 is certainly generous even by your standards. Jonathan processed the paperwork with his usual efficiency. Cashier's check, or certified check? Certified check. I want the amount to be clearly visible when it's presented. That evening, I walked along the Lake Michigan shoreline. My usual route for serious thinking. The water stretched endlessly eastward, its surface rippling with the late afternoon sunlight. Tomorrow's rehearsal dinner would begin the final act of Diana's education. I thought about Walter's likely reaction when he spotted the Technova cufflinks. He had suggested those exact cufflinks as company gifts 3 years ago. He would remember them instantly. That single moment of recognition would be worth 30 years of patience. Diana had spent months preparing her boss for the wedding of a hard-working employee to the son of an unfortunate old woman. Walter would arrive expecting to make polite conversation with Diana's down-on-her-luck future mother-in-law, perhaps offer some charitable words about the dignity of honest labor. Instead, he would discover his co-founder sitting at the family table, wearing their company logo, and writing wedding checks that exceeded Diana's annual salary. I stopped walking and stared out at the horizon. The lake was calm today, its surface like polished glass. Tomorrow would bring storms. But sometimes storms were necessary to clear the air. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Rehearsal dinner tomorrow at 6 p.m. Diana's very excited about you meeting Walter. Still time to change your mind about this, Mom. I typed back. Looking forward to it, sweetheart. Everything will work out exactly as it should. which was the absolute truth. Diana would get exactly what she had been asking for. A chance to show her true character in front of the people who mattered most. She would demonstrate her values, her priorities, her definition of human worth. The only difference would be the audience's reaction. I turned and headed back toward my car, feeling the deep satisfaction of a plan approaching its perfect execution. Tomorrow night, Diana would discover that assumptions could be expensive. By Sunday, she would learn that respect shouldn't be conditional on perceived social status. The gentle waves lapped against the shore behind me, as steady and inexorable as time itself. The Drake Hotel's marble lobby gleamed under massive crystal chandeliers as I walked through the revolving doors, my reflection multiplying in the polished surfaces. 20 minutes earlier, I had driven from Evanston, with the quiet satisfaction of a chess player preparing for checkmate. Tomorrow would bring the revelation, but tonight offered one final opportunity to observe Diana's character in its natural state. The rehearsal was set in the hotel's small chapel, an intimate space with rich mahogany pews and stained glass windows that overlooked Michigan Avenue. Nathan stood near the altar in his rehearsal suit, looking handsome despite the tension I could read in the set of his shoulders. He caught my eye and offered a nervous smile, the look of someone burdened with a significant secret. Diana emerged from a cluster of her Technova colleagues, straightening her blazer with the self-important gesture I had grown to recognize. Her voice carried across the chapel as she spotted me. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Nathan's mother." Her tone held that familiar condescension, now amplified by the presence of her professional audience. "This is Elizabeth Wood, a retiree who lives modestly in Evanston." Lives modestly. The phrase hung in the air like expensive incense, clearly meant to establish a social hierarchy for her colleagues' benefit. "A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Wood," said a woman in an expensive blazer. "Diana has told us you're enjoying your retirement." "Very much so," I replied, shaking her hand. "Though retirement can be quite educational." Diana's colleagues nodded politely, their interest already waning. In their world, retirees were background noise, pleasant enough, but entirely irrelevant to any serious conversation. "My mother-in-law has simple tastes," Diana continued, her voice carrying just enough volume for nearby guests to overhear. "Nothing wrong with that, of course. Different generations, different expectations. Different expectations." I felt my jaw tighten slightly, the first crack in my carefully maintained composure. "Diana," I said quietly, "be careful with your judgments. Tomorrow might bring some surprises." She laughed, the sound carrying far more confidence than wisdom. "Mrs. Wood, you don't need to lecture me about people. I read character for a living. It's an essential skill in sales. We'll see." The two words dropped between us like stones into distilled water. Something in my tone made Diana pause. But her colleagues were watching, and backing down now would damage her carefully constructed image. "What I mean is," Diana pressed on, "success leaves clear indicators. How someone dresses, where they live, what they drive. These things reveal a person's priorities and their capabilities." An interesting theory. It's not a theory, it's an observation. Take Walter Klein, my boss, who's arriving tomorrow. You can spot his quality from across a room. That's earned respect. Not an accident. Earned respect. Walter would find that description amusing, considering we had earned our respect together, sleeping on office floors and living on takeout pizza for 3 years straight. Nathan moved closer, sensing the impending danger. Maybe we should focus on tomorrow's ceremony. But Diana was warming to her theme, emboldened by her audience. "The point is, Mrs. Wood, that character shows in a person's choices. Walter chose excellence at every single step. Others," she gestured vaguely in my direction, "others choose comfort over achievement. Comfort over achievement." The insult was precise, surgical. designed to wound without seeming overtly cruel. "You're very confident in your assessments," I said, my voice carrying the first sharp edge of steel. "Confidence comes from accuracy. I've never misjudged someone's capabilities." Diana's smile suggested she had just won an important point. "Never. Not once. People reveal themselves very quickly, if you just know what to look for." I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 4 months of patience crystallizing into a cold, hard purpose. The chapel fell quiet, conversations pausing as the guests sensed an approaching conflict. "Diana, you're absolutely right about one thing," I said, buttoning my jacket with deliberate care. "Character does show in choices." "Exactly my point. And tomorrow, you'll have several opportunities to demonstrate yours." Diana's confidence flickered slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, walking toward the chapel exit, "that assumptions can be very expensive, especially when they're made in front of people who matter. Mrs. Wood, I don't appreciate. Good night, Diana." I paused at the chapel door, looking back at the assembled guests. "Enjoy your rehearsal. Tomorrow promises to be memorable." Nathan started after me. "Mom. Wait. I'll see you tomorrow, sweetheart. Everything will be exactly as it should be." I walked through the hotel lobby with measured steps, past the doorman's respectful nod, and out into the cool Chicago evening. Behind me, I could hear Diana's voice, resuming its confident pitch, probably explaining my abrupt departure to her colleagues as evidence of an old woman's fragile ego. Let her talk. Tomorrow morning, those same colleagues would witness the most educational experience of Diana Harrington's professional life. My car was waiting in the hotel's circular drive. As I settled behind the wheel, I caught a glimpse of the chapel through the hotel's expansive windows. Diana was gesturing animatedly. Nathan was watching the door where I had just disappeared, and the wedding party was resuming their positions. Tomorrow would bring justice. Tonight brought the sweet anticipation of a plan reaching its perfect fruition. The 30-minute drive from downtown Chicago to Evanston was enough time to transform the sharp anger of the confrontation into the calm determination of justice. By the time I pulled into my driveway, Diana's latest insults had crystallized into a final confirmation that tomorrow's lesson was not just justified, it was necessary. I sat in my darkened car for a moment, staring at my modest house. 4 months ago, Diana had dismissed this very home as evidence of my failure. Tomorrow, she would learn that success isn't always displayed in the size of a mansion or the brand of a luxury car. Inside, I went straight to my study and opened my laptop. Walter had sent an email earlier. "Looking forward to meeting your future daughter-in-law tomorrow." Diana sounds like an ambitious young woman. Ambitious? That was one word for it. I typed back. "You'll meet someone very interesting at the wedding tomorrow, Walter." His response came within minutes. "Who would that be?" "My future daughter-in-law. I think you two will have much to discuss about character and professional development." Intriguing. Should I be prepared for anything specific? "Just be yourself, old friend. Your natural wisdom will be more than sufficient." I closed the laptop and moved to my bedroom, where tomorrow's wedding outfit hung. Perfectly pressed, the charcoal suit looked dignified but unremarkable. Exactly the impression I wanted to make, until the moment of revelation. The Technova cufflinks sat in their velvet box, waiting to catch Walter's attention at precisely the right moment. From my desk drawer, I retrieved the certified check I had picked up yesterday. $50,000. Made out to Nathan and Diana Harrington. The amount was carefully chosen, generous enough to demonstrate substantial wealth, yet large enough to completely shatter Diana's presumptions about my modest circumstances. I thought about tonight's rehearsal, about Diana's confident declaration that she had never misjudged someone's capabilities. The arrogance had been breathtaking, even by her standards. But it was perfect. Tomorrow's humiliation would be absolute. precisely because her confidence was so complete. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Mom, are you okay?" "Diana feels bad about tonight." I typed back. "Diana feels exactly what she should feel. Tomorrow will clarify everything for everyone. I'm worried about what you're planning." "Don't worry, sweetheart. Justice is rarely as harsh as people fear." He didn't respond, probably wrestling with the same conflicted loyalties that had troubled him since our conversation in the garden. Part of him wanted to warn Diana, to soften tomorrow's blow. But a larger part of him understood that some lessons could only be learned through direct experience. I walked to my study window and looked out at the quiet street. My neighbors were settling in for the evening, reading, watching television, living the comfortable, retired lives that Diana imagined were my only option. None of them knew that tomorrow would bring the most satisfying moment of my professional life. Walter's confusion had been perfect. He genuinely had no idea what awaited him at the wedding. When he spotted the Technova cufflinks, when Diana introduced me as Nathan's unemployed mother, when the moment of recognition finally dawned, Walter's expression would be worth 30 years of partnership. I reviewed Diana's behavior one final time. The condescension at the restaurant, the unsolicited career advice, the dismissal of dead-weight employees. Tonight's lecture about character revealing itself through choices. Every insult had been carefully catalogued, every assumption documented. Tomorrow, Diana would discover that character did indeed reveal itself through choices, and her choices had revealed far more than she ever intended. I prepared for bed with the methodical calm of a surgeon before a complex operation. Everything was ready. The suit, the cufflinks, the check, the perfect venue filled with Diana's boss and colleagues as witnesses. Nathan knew just enough to stay out of the way. When the moment came, as I turned off the bedside lamp, I felt the deep satisfaction of a plan approaching a flawless execution. Diana had spent months demonstrating her values, her priorities, her definition of human worth. Tomorrow, she would learn that assumptions about success could be extremely costly, especially when those assumptions were made in front of the very people who controlled her professional future. Sleep came easily, filled with dreams of justice, finally served. The morning of June 15th dawned crisp and clear, the Chicago skyline gleaming under what could only be described as perfect wedding weather. I dressed with the careful attention of an actor preparing for her most important performance, fastening the Technova cufflinks with a particular sense of satisfaction. Today, these small platinum symbols would speak louder than any words. The Drake Hotel was buzzing with wedding activity when I arrived at noon. Nathan was presumably upstairs in the bridal suite with Diana, probably managing his nervous energy with final suit adjustments. I made my way to the small chapel where guests were beginning to gather. Walter stood near the front, looking distinguished in his navy suit, scanning the assembled crowd with the curious interest of someone meeting his employee's new family for the first time. He spotted me across the chapel and nodded politely, a stranger acknowledging another stranger at a mutual acquaintance's wedding. Diana emerged from a side room, resplendent in her formal wear, her confidence radiating like an expensive perfume. She was scanning the crowd too, probably ensuring that Walter had the best possible view of the ceremony. When her eyes met mine, I saw a flicker of uncertainty, last night's confrontation still echoing in her mind. "Mrs. Wood," Diana approached with a forced joviality, "I'm glad you decided to come after our discussion last night." "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," I replied. "This promises to be unforgettable." Diana's smile tightened slightly, but she was too focused on today's performance to dwell on cryptic warnings. Her colleagues from Technova had claimed seats in the third row, perfect witnesses for whatever was about to unfold. The processional music began, and I took my position near the chapel entrance. Nathan appeared at the top of the aisle, looking radiant in his grandmother's restored wedding suit, his face glowing with a nervous joy. He tucked his arm through mine, and for a moment, the elaborate revenge plot faded away into simple, maternal pride. "You look so handsome, sweetheart," I whispered as we began our walk. "Thank you, Mom," His voice carried a tremor of emotion and anticipation. For everything. We moved down the aisle at the traditional, measured pace. As guests rose in respectful acknowledgement, Diana stood at the altar, her eyes fixed on Nathan, with a look of genuine affection that reminded me why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. Walter watched from his front row seat, probably calculating the appropriate level of enthusiasm for his employee's wedding. The officiant, a distinguished woman in formal robes, raised her hands as we reached the altar. "Who gives this man in marriage?" "I do," I said clearly, my voice carrying to every corner of the chapel. "His mother," with great love and hope for his happiness. Nathan squeezed my hand before releasing it, and I formally placed his hand in Diana's. For a moment, the three of us stood together, mother, son, and daughter-in-law, while the chapel watched in reverent silence. "Be happy, dear," I whispered to Diana, kissing her cheek before taking my seat in the front row. The ceremony proceeded with traditional dignity. Diana and Nathan exchanged their vows with an obvious sincerity, their words carrying genuine emotion despite the undercurrents of tension that I knew existed. I found myself genuinely moved by their declarations of love and commitment, even as I anticipated the education that was set to follow. Walter sat 2 seats away, occasionally glancing in my direction with polite curiosity. Soon enough, that curiosity would transform into something far more interesting. The officiant pronounced them wife and husband, and Diana kissed Nathan with the enthusiasm of a woman who believed her future was perfectly secure. The chapel erupted in applause, guests rising to celebrate the new couple as wedding bells chimed from the hotel's sound system. As the recessional began, I noticed Diana scanning the crowd again, her eyes finding Walter with a look of obvious satisfaction. She had successfully married the man she loved in front of her professional mentor, having navigated the potential embarrassment of her unemployed mother-in-law without any incident. The receiving line formed in the chapel's vestibule, with guests offering their congratulations as Nathan and Diana beamed with newlywed joy. I positioned myself appropriately as the mother of the groom, accepting well wishes and compliments about the beautiful ceremony. Diana was in her element now, introducing Nathan to her colleagues with an obvious pride. "My husband," she kept saying, savoring the new title. Her confidence had returned completely, last night's confrontation forgotten in the warm glow of her wedding success. Through the crowd, I saw Walter approaching the receiving line, probably preparing to offer the appropriate congratulations to his employee's new family. The moment I had been orchestrating for 4 long months was finally at hand. Diana spotted Walter's approach and straightened up unconsciously, the ambitious employee preparing to impress her boss one final time. The hotel's banquet hall sparkled under crystal chandeliers, having been transformed into an elegant reception space during the 2 hours between the ceremony and the celebration. Guests mingled with champagne glasses in hand, their conversations mixing with the soft jazz emanating from the hotel's string quartet. I positioned myself near the bar, watching Diana work the room with a practiced enthusiasm. Walter stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Lake Michigan, his distinguished profile outlined against the afternoon sunlight. He had spent the ceremony observing politely, probably calculating the appropriate level of engagement with his employee's new family. Soon, that calculation would become entirely irrelevant. Diana approached Walter with the calculated confidence of an ambitious subordinate, Nathan's hand tucked proudly through her arm. This was her moment introducing her handsome new husband to the man who controlled her professional future, while simultaneously demonstrating her superior social connections. "Mr. Klein." Diana's voice carried perfectly across the reception noise. "I'd like you to meet my husband Nathan and his mother." I moved closer, timing my approach with the precision of a watchmaker. 4 months of patience were about to pay dividends that would compound for years to come. Walter turned with a polite interest, extending his hand to Nathan. "Congratulations, my boy. Diana speaks of you constantly." "Thank you, Mr. Klein. Diana admires you tremendously." Diana beamed at this exchange, her chest visibly swelling with pride. Then she gestured toward me, with a casual condescension. "And this is my mother-in-law, Elizabeth Wood." Her tone shifted subtly, carrying just enough dismissal to establish the intended hierarchy. She's an unemployed retiree, lives modestly in Evanston." The words hung in the air like an expensive, unpleasant perfume, obvious to everyone within hearing distance. Several of Diana's colleagues had drifted closer, probably expecting another demonstration of their rising star's social superiority. Walter's head turned toward me slowly, his executive-trained composure slipping for just a single moment. His eyes found my face, then dropped immediately to my cufflinks. The Teknova logo caught the chandelier light perfectly, platinum and diamonds spelling out 30 years of partnership. "Elizabeth." Walter's voice carried a note of genuine shock. "Elizabeth Wood." Diana blinked, clearly not expecting this level of recognition. You know her? Know her?" Walter's voice rose slightly, drawing attention from nearby conversations. "Elizabeth, what in the blazes are you doing here?" "I'm attending my son's wedding," I replied calmly, extending my hand. "It's good to see you, Walter. You look well." Diana's face cycled through a rapid succession of confusion, suspicion, and a growing, dawning alarm. "Mr. Klein, I think there might be some mistake. This is just Nathan's mother. She's unemployed." Walter stared at Diana as if she had just announced her intention to become a professional circus performer. "Unemployed?" "Diana, this is Elizabeth Wood. She's the co-founder of Teknova Innovations. She's been my business partner for 30 years. The words hit Diana like a series of physical blows. I watched her face transform from one of confident superiority to one of dawning horror, her mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. Around us, conversations had stopped entirely, as wedding guests sensed a drama far more compelling than small talk. "Partner?" Diana's voice cracked slightly. That's impossible. She's just what?" Walter's tone had shifted from surprise to something considerably less friendly. "Just the woman who built our company from nothing? Just the genius who created half of our core technologies? Just my closest friend and business colleague?" Diana turned to stare at me, her face pale beneath her wedding tan. You're the co-founder and primary shareholder of Teknova Innovations." I confirmed quietly. "The company where you've spent the last 3 years explaining to me how business really works." Nathan moved closer to Diana, his face a mixture of sympathy and anxiety. He had known this moment was coming, but he couldn't have prepared for the public devastation that was now written across his new wife's features. Walter's executive instincts were kicking in now, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making difficult personnel decisions. "Diana, exactly what have you been saying to my business partner?" Diana's mouth worked soundlessly, her confident wedding day persona crumbling like expensive paper in the rain. The colleagues who had been so impressed by her networking skills were now witnessing the most spectacular professional implosion in Teknova's 30-year history. I didn't know," Diana finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "She never told me." Walter's expression suggested that this explanation was entirely insufficient. Diana's face had gone from a wedding day glow to a surgical sweet pallor in less than 30 seconds. Around us, the elegant reception had transformed into a riveting spectacle. Guests were forming a loose circle around our group, like spectators at an unexpected street performance. "Mr. Klein, please, I didn't know." Diana's voice carried the desperation of a woman, watching her entire career evaporate in real time. "She never told me she worked at Teknova." "Worked at?" Walter's eyebrows rose with a dangerous calm. "Diana, Elizabeth doesn't work at Teknova. Elizabeth is Teknova." Half the patents on our core technologies bear her signature. The information hit Diana like successive physical blows. I could almost see her calculating the full scope of her mistake. Every condescending comment, every piece of unsolicited advice, every moment of casual dismissal, playing back in her mind in devastating clarity. I can explain everything. Diana's voice cracked as she turned between Walter and me with a frantic energy. There's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding. Walter's voice had acquired the steel that made him so formidable in boardroom negotiations. Is how my senior sales manager could treat my business partner like a charity case for 4 months without anyone telling me. Nathan moved protectively toward Diana, her wedding dress rustling against the growing tension. Mr. Klein. Diana honestly didn't know. My mom never mentioned the company connection. Your mother shouldn't have needed to mention it, Walter replied, his attention now fixed on Diana with a laser-like intensity. Basic human respect isn't conditional on someone's job title or their bank balance. Diana was spiraling now, her hands gesturing wildly as words tumbled out without any coherent structure. The thing is, Mr. Klein, I always treat people with respect. Always. I was just trying to help, offering guidance, career advice. Career advice? Walter's voice could have frozen the champagne. You offered career advice to the woman who created your job? The nearby guests were no longer even pretending to have other conversations. Diana's Technova colleagues stood frozen, probably calculating their own professional distances from the unfolding disaster. The hotel staff had quietly positioned themselves around the perimeter, uncertain whether to intervene or simply document the entertainment. Diana. Walter continued with the methodical precision of an experienced executioner. Explain to me how someone demonstrates respect by calling their business partner unemployed and dead weight. Diana's eyes widened with pure panic. I never said that. I would never. Monday morning. Walter's voice cut through Diana's protests like a surgical blade. You can explain your definition of respect to human resources. You can also start looking for new employment. No. Diana's composure shattered completely. Mr. Klein, please. This is my wedding day. I made a mistake, but I can fix this. The mistake, Walter replied coldly, was mine. For promoting someone who judges people by their appearance rather than by their character. Diana's face had progressed from pale to gray, her breathing shallow and rapid. Nathan reached for her arm, but she was too far gone in her panic to notice the comfort he was offering. Around us, the wedding reception had become a living cautionary tale about the dangers of assumptions. There has to be something I can do, Diana pleaded, her voice breaking like an adolescent's. Some way to make this right. I'll apologize publicly. I'll take a demotion. Anything. Walter looked at Diana with the expression of someone discovering mold in an expensive bottle of wine. You will apologize to Elizabeth, certainly. Whether that changes anything remains to be seen. Diana's head snapped toward me with a desperate hope, her eyes wide with the kind of panic reserved for people who are watching everything they have ever worked for disappear simultaneously. The confident young executive who had lectured me about business success had been replaced by someone who looked like she might collapse at any moment. Mrs. Wood. Elizabeth? Please? Diana's voice trembled with a genuine terror. I know I made mistakes, but I can learn. I can change. Please don't let him destroy my career. The moment hung between us like a sword, sharp and gleaming, and ready to fall. Diana stood before me with her entire future, balanced on the edge of my next words, her face a study, in absolute desperation. Nathan watched with tears, threatening to ruin his wedding photos, torn between the two women he loved most. Walter waited with the patient intensity of someone prepared to execute a professional death sentence. The wedding guests formed a silent amphitheater around us, their champagne glasses forgotten as they witnessed a moment that would be discussed at Chicago social events for years to come. "Walter," I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly in the hushed banquet hall. "What?" Walter's eyebrows rose slightly, but he remained silent, deferring to his partner's judgment, just as he had for 3 decades. I looked at Diana, seeing not the arrogant young woman who had condescended to me for months, but someone who had just learned the most expensive lesson of her professional life. Her hands trembled slightly as she waited for my verdict. "Diana," I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm. "Look at me." She raised her eyes, and for the first time, I saw genuine remorse there. Not just fear for her career, but an actual understanding of what she had done wrong. "I accept your apology," I continued, watching as a wave of relief flooded her features. "But I have one condition for my forgiveness." "Anything," Diana whispered. "Absolutely anything. Never again judge someone's worth by the size of their paycheck or the label on their clothes." I paused, letting the words sink in. Character isn't measured in dollar signs, and respect shouldn't depend on bank statements. Diana nodded vigorously, tears of relief and genuine remorse mixing in her eyes. "I understand. I promise. I've learned my lesson." I turned to Walter, who was watching our exchange with the careful attention of someone evaluating a critical business decision. "Walter, Diana made assumptions based on incomplete information. We've all done that at various points in our careers." Walter's expression softened slightly, though his executive instincts remained engaged. "Are you asking me to overlook 4 months of disrespect toward my business partner? I'm asking you to consider that sometimes the best lessons come from mercy rather than from punishment." I placed my hand on Diana's shoulder. Diana has a good track record at the company. Her sales numbers speak for themselves. Perhaps this experience will make her a better manager, not just a more careful one. Diana looked between Walter and me with the expression of someone watching her entire future being negotiated by forces far beyond her control. Nathan stepped closer, his hand finding Diana's arm in a gesture of support and solidarity. Walter studied Diana for a long moment, his businessman's instincts warring with his deep respect for his partner's judgment. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Diana." Walter's voice carried a formal authority, but it had lost its sharp, cutting edge. "You'll keep your position, but you are on probation for 6 months. Any hint of the attitudes Elizabeth has described, and you're gone. Is that understood?" "Completely?" "Completely," Diana managed, her voice thick with gratitude and exhaustion. "Thank you, Mr. Klein. Thank you both." I extended my hand to Diana, and she shook it with the grip of someone sealing a sacred covenant. "Welcome to the family, dear," I said quietly. "Try to remember that everyone deserves respect until they prove otherwise." "I will," Diana promised. "I absolutely will." Nathan stepped forward and embraced both of us simultaneously, his joy evident despite the traumatic revelation. Around us, the wedding guests began to relax, conversations resuming as the drama resolved into something resembling family harmony. Walter clapped me on the shoulder, his familiar grin finally returning. 30 years, and you can still surprise me, partner. Retirement keeps life interesting, I replied. The string quartet, sensing the crisis had passed, resumed their gentle melodies. Champagne glasses were raised again. Conversations returned to normal wedding topics, and Diana learned that sometimes the most important lessons in life come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. As the reception continued around us, I watched Diana interact with the other guests, noting the subtle but significant changes in her demeanor. The sharp edge of superiority had been replaced by something that looked remarkably like humility. Sometimes, justice served with wisdom tasted far sweeter than revenge. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.